For those of you who don't know, this is our Masterbuilder, Mr. Dennis Galuzska, who's with us from the Custom Shop in Corona. My name's Robert Maywalt. I'm with the Custom Shop sales team. I've been with Fender sales for about 12 years now, and also from our sales team is Mr. Brian Moletti right here. And Paul Van Name is our Fender District Manager here, so Paul's with us today. And we're here, we come to the road shows, and we bring along our handy tour guide. And if any of you, how many of you guys have ordered a custom guitar before, just spec'd out? Okay, beautiful. What we did is we put this together for you. This is the first year we've done it, and I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look through here, but we're trying to use this as a path to kind of help you design guitars more efficiently. And Brian, can you tell these folks a little bit about the tour guide?
Yeah, this is we're trying to put everything together into one kind of complete package. So we have the 2015 catalog collection pieces in the back, and we've added a few features. We get a lot of questions about specifically neck profiles and fret wires, and right here, these are probably the biggest, most frequent questions that we get are, what neck shapes do I want? What neck shapes do you guys offer? What's good? I've got small hands, I've got large hands, I play this kind of music, I play that kind of music. And we've got that now here so you can actually kind of visualize and see what it is that's going to best be suited for you. But in the front of the catalog, right through here, this is the place where you can start with your base model and figure out what exactly it is that you want. So we've got the modern series, we've got the vintage series. You can go through, find out what it is that you can take a look at some of these guitars up on the wall and say, I like that guitar, but I want it in a different color. Since I'm changing the color, I want to make it a little bit more mine. Can I do these kind of pickups instead? Can I do this kind of fretboard radius? I don't want it as heavily relic, I want it a little bit lighter relic. And that's what all of this is. You can go through and pick out each individual little nuance of the guitar and make it absolutely yours.
And so this is what Brian does when you guys tell Frank, hey, I want a guitar. Frank usually calls Brian, and he'll put it together. So Brian's here today. He'll be hanging around the whole time. If you guys want to chat with him, or you think maybe at some point you might want a custom order, this is a guy that's going to go through anyway. So just to let you know and put a face to when Frank says my Fender sales guy, here we are. Okay, so just a quick little rundown. The Custom Shop, established in 1987 by then CEO Mr. Bill Schultz, and Bill led a team of Fender employees and outside investors to purchase Fender back from CBS in 1985. And one of the first things that he wanted to do was establish a custom shop. And he wanted a place that could build the best Fender guitars, best USA guitars. He tasked them, it was a very small group at first, but he tasked them with going out and finding some of the old tooling that that Leo and the group used in the 50s, and using some of those same techniques and getting into it. And he also, quite frankly, wanted a vehicle that artists could come in and partner with Fender. The Custom Shop was used to lure the Becks and Claptons of the world into working with Fender, and it worked. I think the first artist series model that Fender ever did was the Eric Clapton, and that was developed early on in the Custom Shop, and still doing it. Yeah, and still doing it. And Eric did what many of you would do. It's like, I play this mid-50s Strat, but if I'm being honest, if I'm designing my own guitar, I'd change a couple of things, and so he ended up doing what eventually became his signature model. And the Custom Shop got its nickname, the Dream Factory. The motto, I'm sure you guys have heard throughout the years, if you can dream it, they can build it, And it got that reputation because, early on they were doing just crazy one-off builds. They got into doing a lot of reissue stuff. Come to find out, there's a big market out there for people who had guitars from the 50s and 60s. They don't want to take on the road anymore. They don't want to take them out to the clubs and get them beat up. And word started to get around that Fender is doing these, you know, these reissues. They're using the same tooling and they're using the same techniques, and they're pretty darn good. So, you know, we got the reputation for that. And also, it was a place where not just artists could come, but, you know, players like yourselves could come and get something tailor-made to your own playing style. Or, you know, everybody has a unique, you play different styles of music and everything. So the Custom Shop really got its reputation for that. And it blew up. Into the 90s, they started adding more Masterbuilders in to keep up with demand from all around the world. Masterbuilders such as this gentleman right here, Mr. Dennis Galuzska. So Dennis, can you tell everybody how you got started building guitars and eventually made your way to Fender?
I was working at a high-end furniture shop, little two-man shop, for about 13 years. And the owner was an acoustic guitar player, and he started making acoustics there in the shop. And I'd been a drummer my whole life, so music was always my thing. And I kind of got my feet wet there and was playing drums for one of the builders at Fender at the time. And a job came up to build the Diaquisto, which is the big jazz box, and the Robin Ford, which is like, we used to jokingly call it, it was developed by Dan Smith, our R&D guy, so we used to call it the Les Paul Reed Dan Smith. Anyway, so I was building those, and then 17 years later, I'm here talking to you folks. And
so when you first kind of started at Fender, was it kind of daunting? I mean, you knew of the history somewhat of the brand, right?
It was daunting being with other people, you know, going from a two-man shop to a place full of jokesters that, you know, make sailors blush. So
now, those of you who've been to a couple road shows, you know we bring out some different Masterbuilders. There's a lot of characters out in the shop, but how's working with those other builders? How's that helped to kind of hone your style?
You know, it's funny. We all kind of have our thing, like doctors almost, you know, and we'll bounce stuff off each other all the time. Yeah, it's a cool collaborative environment. You know, we come up with something new. If I have an idea for something, I don't hang on to it. I shoot my mouth off immediately. So if one of those guys tries to steal it, they're going, "Oh, you're a jerk. That guy did that." So I make it very transparent.
Yeah. So since we've got you here, I want to talk a little bit about you know, some of the handwork that we do in the custom shop that you guys do. We're looking here. I always start with the neck because, you know, that's what everybody says when they play a custom shop guitar. Like, boy, the neck just sold it for me. And I think a lot of people don't realize, you know, the Masterbuilders do a lot of it hand shaped, right?
Yeah, we do, and you know, we use. I like to say it's a pretty honest use of technology. You know, we use CNC machines, as anyone in this room would, as opposed to, you know. But then he'll show you some pictures later of some builds where we got to do the old school routing and bandsaw, like completely handmade. I mean, I've made several guitars there that were 100%, you know, just hand tool made because I had to.
Right.
It was sweet, you know. But you know, for this body example, it's all cut out on a CNC. Why wouldn't I? You want me to chop down the tree too? You know, I mean,
we're hand shaping.
We're hand shaping, and then there's also little touches that we do, and I can usually tell a builder's guitar from across the room, just on the certain thing. My necks feel a certain way, my fretwork feels a certain way. We all kind of have our own little personality take on it, but they all feel amazing. So when I'm done with this guitar, you guys are welcome to pass it around, and I don't think anyone's going to go, "Oh, this doesn't feel good." If you do, be honest, tell me, and I'll. And you know what Rob was talking about, all the old school tooling. One of my all-time favorite things about, I learned this a few years ago, and I had worked there years and I didn't even know. But if you pick up a Tele, any Tele that we make, you'll notice on the side there's these marks. They're draw marks from the press. One day I was specking out Lenny Kravitz's 54 Tele because he wanted a few more. and our head of metal shop, who's been there since 1956, I believe, said, "Oh, let me show you something." And those draw marks are exactly the same from a 50s Tele as they are today because it's on the same tool. It's like a fingerprint. So I mean, you guys can't see them, but when you get a minute, pick up any Tele in here that has this vintage bridge.
Yeah, you'll see the little lines on the side. And if
there's a big one here. That's the seam of the tool. Same on the other side. So, you know, it's pretty cool to still use all that old stuff and make it work. You know, there's no. It's kind of an old meets new shop, really, which is pretty cool. And they're pretty psycho about making sure that we maintain the important stuff.
That they do. You know, when we talk about original tooling, it's, you know, it's not stuff that's going to affect the tone of the guitar, but
it's going to make it better.
But it's just, you know, they have a certain way of building. You know, they build these guitars the way that Leo wanted. Like the Stratocasters, one of the builders took me through the shop, and there's a big punch press, and there's a guy working there, I think his name was Rogelio, and he'd been working there since the 60s, on that same machine, punching out the Strat input jacks, just those little pieces of metal from the Strat input jacks. And that's not something that affects tone, but he's been doing it, you know, the same way, on the same machine for decades. And that's just part of, you know, what I call that mojo, that kind of invisible thing. You do enough of that, enough of those little things, and it starts to make a difference.
A guy that runs Custom Shop Paint, Jesus Andrade, he's been there a really long time. I don't know exactly how long, but if any of you have ever seen the old Antigua bursts, he painted every one of those, and he's our painter. So you order a Custom Shop Antigua, it's the same guy. You know, it's there's that guy. You know, recently till Abby retired, she'd been there since '56, and yeah, you know, it's pretty cool to bounce this stuff off of these people. You know. Get the real stuff.
And speaking of painting and pickup winding, you know, I like this this slide right here because it just really does show you. You'd be surprised, you know, a lot of times, I'm sorry, I'll get out of the way so you can see. You know, a lot of times we do these events and, you know, we talk about what the factory's really like, and you saw a little bit of it in the video. It's not, you know, this big automated place. A lot of people think there are guitar bodies going through on an assembly line, and robot arms like the Toyota factory are coming and spraying them all exactly alike. No, there's a person in a funny suit in a little booth, you know, spraying the guitars. They're buffing them by hand. The pickup winding, I'm glad you mentioned. He says Abby. Does everybody here know who Abby is? Yeah, Abigail Eobard. She was one of Leo's employees back in the 50s, and she had been winding pickups for Fender for decades. And she recently retired, and this is Josefina Campos, and she was sort of her protege. You know, she passed all of her knowledge, the recipes and everything. She passed them down to Josefina, who's winding some amazing pickups now. So it's really cool that it's that knowledge is being passed on to a younger generation. And, you know, Dennis, when we talk about hand wound pickups and scatter wound, can you explain a little bit for folks?
Yeah, basically, you know, over on the production line we do machine wound, and I think they wind 6 at a time. I think 4 or 6 at a time. But you know, the machine winds them perfect. It's really cool. So every time you pull that same pickup, it's going to sound the same as the other 6 that were on the machine. With scatter winding, she's just like a bird's nest, making it all crazy. And what that, are there any electrical engineers in here that can corroborate what I'm about to say? Well, what that
or
does
debunk,
is,
or refute. Yeah,
right? I chose my word wisely.
Yeah, very well done.
It eliminates a phenomenon called coupling, where when you have parallel wires, they start to borrow from each other. So if you were to drive from my house to like Las Vegas, you'll know the power lines will start, one will drop or they'll cross. But if they stayed parallel the whole time, by the time it got to Vegas, there'd be no signal left. So that's what scatter winding does.
Impedance, or would it be inductive, or what's the property? I'm an electrician, but I'm trying to figure out.
Well, electricity voltage travels on the outside of the wire,
Correct.
not on the inside of the wire. So as they go, you know, they're going to start to, like a magnetic field, they're going to start to, yeah.
Inductance, yeah.
So what scatter winding does is it eliminates a lot of that. You get a not necessarily a more powerful pickup, but just a better sounding, more clarity, cleaner, yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, they might vary.
Yeah.
So you
But-
get if you find one that you really like, it's like, oh, I better buy this one.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because I always like to kind of romanticize it. Yeah, I always say they're like snowflakes because of the human element. Each individual pickup is going to be its own thing, and also because not only the human element, but it's scattered. You know, it's random. And to Dennis's point, man, if you get a set of Fender hand wound pickups and they hit you just right, they have that character. You know, go ahead and hold on to those. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. Also, you know, they weren't really machine winding back in the 50s. They were,
No, and then even Leo made some adjustments to the winding machine, which was pretty interesting because what happens, you know, you got a motor with a belt that goes to the part where the pickup is on and it winds. What happens is sometimes they get a little tight around the corners, and some where all this dust is coming from. And sometimes you can either break the enamel on the wire, or because they're coated in a light enamel, so they don't short each other out. So what Leo ended up doing was he took off the belt drive and he just put a rubber band on, so it would have a little give and take, which was pretty interesting. So hand winding pickup, man. If I had to do it for a living, I wouldn't be. I'd be in prison right now for strangling someone. Because to just sit there.
it's tedious.
A
Yeah.
little monotonous.
Holy crap! Josefina will sit, and she's so friendly. She's so nice. Hi, you know.
What's the average number of lines on a single?
8,500
So
maybe.
that's why you choose
Yeah.
How would you give that day? 3?
So, you know, we're talking about the process a little. I do want to get into relics because we have a Masterbuilder here, and you know, this is a big year for the Fender Custom Shop. Something we're very proud of is the relic work. Now we know it's not for everybody, and some people say, why do you beat up a perfectly good guitar? But it is. It's something that's really taken on an amazing life of its own, and 20 years ago at the NAMM show, like I said early on, the Custom Shop got a reputation for doing great reissues, and they were doing their thing, and you know, they brought out the first 2 relics, and it was a no-caster and kind of a Mary Kay-ish Strat, as you can see here, and they just hung them up, no fanfare, no you know, no signs to say what they are. They just hung them up. Now everybody assumes, since we were doing these reissues, that we brought out a couple of vintage guitars as a nod to you know, the great classic guitars, and it wasn't even people in Fender didn't realize until we told them, like, hey, these are new guitars, and this is a thing. We aged them, and it was a new thing that happened. It was kind of like, some people loved it, some people hated it, some people like Frank got it and said, hey, I need some for my store, you know. And fast forward to 20 years later, and it's really become an art form. And I know I like to romanticize this stuff a little bit, but it's true. These guys, these Masterbuilders, are students of the way these vintage Fenders age, and they're fascinated by the wear marks. How does that happen? Why does that happen? What happens if what style of music was this guy playing? You know. So we've got Dennis here, and he'll kind of go into it a little more there. And while Dennis is talking, I'll show you some of his recent relic work. So.
Yeah, you kind of gotta tell a story about the guitar, you know, if you're gonna sit there, and because so many times it's like, it looks just like the last one I did, you know. We all kind of have our style. Again, I can pick out different builders relicking from across the room because they kind of stand out. But recently, Todd Kraus, Dale Wilson, and myself kind of redeveloped some new ways of doing it, and I think we're getting pretty awesome results, you know.
So that's over a Paisley.
Yeah, it was an order. I just make what you guys ask for.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So,
yeah, this kind of, you know, it kind of gives it that old fence checking and wear, you know. and I don't know how far I can get into how I do it, or if anyone would be interested, but we just kind of came up with some new ways of getting the different layers of colors, which was really hard to do before. Dale's kicking all our ass at it, though. He's like, he's really
Dale's doing some really great relic work, but it's funny to talk to these guys, and something as little as that is. It's a breakthrough, being
Toiled
able
over
to
that
take
for
off
years.
that top layer. Yeah, do you have a question?
No, I don't want to interrupt, but how long have you been doing that redo paint thing? Because that's a trip, it's like the burgundy under the gold or whatever kind of
color.
well,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
color over
but
color. Yeah, that
yeah.
started because back in the day, everything was a sunburst, and if someone
Right.
wanted a custom color, they'd squirt over it. So you
Sure.
get relic guitars coming in, not relic, real ones rather, I
Yeah,
should
yeah.
say,
Right.
and you'd see the sunburst under it. Well, some of the dealers like, well, what would it look like if and they start throwing. So now we're getting like these really goofy things. And I mean, I guess paint over paisley would make sense at a
Yeah,
certain point.
typical,
I don't want that on my guitar. Paint over it, So.
It started out like he said, where we were painting over sunbursts is a nod to what they used to do, and
Kind of evolved.
being a custom shop, guys, dealers started and customers started asking that question, like, hey, can you paint over tangerine? Like, yeah, sure, we can do
So
that.
without going into a lot of detail, and it might be a stupid question, but in general, when you're doing the relicing, you're always removing material.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you're not putting that stuff down to that.
No.
look down.
We always
Yeah.
start them out as new
Yeah.
and go that way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only way to get there.
Yeah.
And we use a different kind of material for relics. We use an airplane lacquer instead of another. We had the original lacquer guy was making our lacquer, McFadden, for years, forever, since the beginning of Fender. He retired about 6 years ago or 5 years ago. So we were scrambling for about a year trying to get the formula right, because he just kind of said, you're on your own, and left it to us. So Cardinal really stepped up and got us some good material that's working terrific.
When you
Yes, sir.
started, how many original were made a year, and then how did it progress? Gene, can you give us a chronological order of how many you sell a year now? that you
Oh,
made?
the relics?
How many you made? Yeah, when you first started it, how many were made to kind of catch on, and then through
Oh,
5 years
who
later you're
knows?
doing this? Or
I can
How
tell
many
you
do a
that
year?
over
A
half
lot.
of the guitars that we put out are relics.
I would say
and
more.
Really?
Probably more than it's
And-
and it's we get a lot of customer and dealer requests. So
I
that's
get
what
guys
people
all the
want.
time. Yeah, they tell me, why don't you stop making relics? Well, why don't you stop ordering relics?
so number would be.
I wanna get, were any of you involved in either the Hendrix or the Steve Ray Vaughan project?
No, that was
Maybe
John
those-
Cruz.
Was that old? Okay.
Yeah, it was older.
Right. Dennis actually he's done some of the tribute projects. We'll talk about one of them here in a bit. Last word on the relics is you guys are still, like you said, you don't want to talk about the actual techniques that you're using, but you are still coming up with new.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
So
mean,
you're
even,
constantly still moving forward in this process.
I mean, even this one, in years past when we would do wear like this, you'd feel where the paint ended and the wood started. You don't at all now. It's just, I mean, the paint is so thin, and it just blends really, really easily, and it just looks more realistic. And we don't shoot from the hip on this stuff. Anytime a vintage guitar comes within a mile of us, we get it in, and we're
So that old
Have you guys
rumor that
invented any tools of your own to do this?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, we adapt stuff.
Modify.
Adapt for sure. Yeah.
you go to the shop and you see where the relic tools are. It looks like a torture chamber.
So Dennis, how many guitars do you do a year?
It depends on the orders. I mean, if I had nothing but double necks for the year, then I would have probably only built 12 guitars that year. It just depends on the order. A 56 Strat's going to go a lot faster than some. So it just depends. There's no average. It's just I got to account for the hours in the guitar versus the hours I'm there. Do our own accounting. We have to have several projects going at once because you guys want your guitars. So we're trying to keep things moving, but it is
Oh,
a
well.
custom shop.
Yeah.
I mean, our old boss used to say the world's full of people that can build guitars, but doing what we do is a little more difficult, being able to manage taking your calls as we're building, which we do, and emails, and make what you asked for, and it's tricky, but you know, we get to hang on to that job because we can do it.
So, thank you, by the way, for talking about all that stuff with us. So we'll talk about artist guitars a little bit, like you were talking about, and I believe SRV1 was the project that you were asking about. Everybody familiar with our tribute series? Do you know what that is? That's when we take iconic guitars, or we partner with players who have done some iconic music over the year, and we, for lack of a better word, clone their guitars. And you know, the tribute series goes all the way. You know, we did Clapton's Blackie, you know, the SRV1, and we have Dennis here, who's kind of worked on a tribute series guitar, so we'll talk to him in a minute. But what I wanted to say about the artist models and the artists who come through the shop is going back to one of the reasons the custom shop was established was we needed a vehicle for these artists to come in and partner with Fender and get custom guitars built, you know, for themselves. Some of them end up having signature models. Some of them just have a builder they like, and you know, they just get guitars from them. But it's really the greatest artists in the world come to Fender and they get guitars built. Now, all the names on this page have had guitars built by one of our 8 master builders, and we show you this slide not to say, hey, we build for rock stars, isn't that great? But I just want to, I always like when I get out to the road shows to kind of hammer home through Frank and Music Gallery, they afford you the opportunity to say, I had Clapton's builder build this Strat for me. You know what I mean? Like, and we'll talk about some artists that Dennis has worked with too, and you have the same opportunity of access through Frank and the gallery. You have access to the same builders that these great players do. So
the process is the same. We don't give them anything any more special than we give you. It's the same.
So I always like to kind of make that point and just remind everybody.
So you don't grovel any less or more depending on the person.
Well, we'll talk about Andy's guitar for a minute. But here, you know, builders or artists are still coming through the shop, and they're coming through to hang out with our builders. Now, our builders are a collection of characters.
It's my daughter.
Yeah, the artists that come through are also a collection of characters. But it's great because that's why. One of the big reasons why the custom shop was established originally, and still to this day, it's very much still that vehicle for, you know, the greatest players in the world to come through and get guitars tailor fit to their styles. So something else we're very proud of. But let's talk about some guitars for artists that Dennis has worked on, and then we'll talk about some, you know, non-artists, some other really cool builds that he's done. But this was a tribute series guitar. It was Andy Summers' Telecaster from the Police, and can you talk about this project a little bit?
Yeah, you know, it came down. I was going to do that Tele, and it kind of freaked me out because I knew it was pretty Frankensteined up. So I went out there, inspected all out and everything, and about 2 weeks after, they announced that they were reforming to do the tour, and I was a huge Police fan. In fact, when I went to his house to spec out the guitar, I walked in the front door, and Stewart's drums were set up right there. I was like, that's for that kit. Yeah, that was fun. I ended up building all of Andy's guitars for that tour, a couple Teles, and then the red Strat that he played a lot. I also did 3 of those for him that he played on the tour. So it was a big charge. And when I did the first article, I sent it to him, and we made a shop mule first. It was and all I wanted was, because I spent a year trying to get the electronics right, because this is his original, and you notice the switch is gone, the preamp had died, so they simplified it. He wanted it put back to original, which is what I did, but it took me about a year to get the electronics right. So I sent him the mule. It was just some random unfinished Tele body, and I said, you need to check the electronics and the neck shape only. I put a big note in the strings, and he gets it and he calls me, none of this is right, man. There's not even any paint on the body, and it's.
Why read?
Oh no.
Man, okay. So I'd explain that to him.
I'm a rock star. I don't read.
Anyways, it ended up being great. It's so good that I sent him the first one. 2 nights later, they played on the Grammys, and he played that guitar, which was really cool. At first, I thought he played the original, and I'm watching it on the DVR, and oh, it's got the Switch. He's playing mine.
The Switch is the dead
That was
giveaway,
pretty
right?
cool. And yeah, they were so great. You know, treated me like royalty and gave me the full treatment. It was real nice.
So on something like this guitar or the SRV-1, when it's really beat up in relic, can you talk a little bit about the painstaking process? How the heck do you clone all the nicks and dings on that?
Well, on some of the stuff we have what we call relicing masks. We have a guy in house that makes stickers so we can acetone off certain spots. You know. And Todd Krause used the best analogy I've heard. It's like if you're going to draw the Big Dipper, you draw the Big Dipper and then just fill in stars around it. Kind of the same thing. That's like a Big Dipper there, and you know, and that, you know. So you get the key points and then kind of fill in the rest. You're going to eat a bullet pretty soon if you try to get every single one. You know, there's limits here. This project was a little bit of a disappointment because the original run was only supposed to be 100, and I was going to do all 100. Take as long as I want to do it, and then the police went back on tour. Oh, we got to do 250 of them now, and all the other builders are going to get involved. So they kind of sucked the rug out from under me on that one. That's okay.
Cool. So that was actually a tribute model, but I want to show you guys some of the artists who've come through the shop and just had custom builds from Dennis. Either really kind of stylistic stuff or just stuff they needed for their playing style. So I told Dennis earlier, I'm like, I rated your Instagram. By the way, if any of you guys are on Instagram, Dennis's Instagram is killer. You should follow. So every time he does a cool guitar in the shop, he'll just take a picture of it and put it up there. It's really cool. Yeah. So can you talk about the Keith Urban Dirty Snake Tele? First, tell everybody what the Snakehead is, and then.
Snakehead was the very first Tele, the prototype of the Tele.
See the headstock?
Yeah, the headstock's different. Pretty much everything. The neck plate, every single piece is different. So Keith wanted one with a truss rod. The original didn't have a truss rod, so we had to add a truss rod to that, which was harder than you think when you're operating off CNC programs. Now I got to hand make this neck because we don't have a truss rod program that'll fit this because everything was narrower. And anyway, handmade guitar, which was cool. I like doing it. And he just basically said, you can't beat this thing up too much. I want it to look just completely disgusting and destroyed. So that's what I did for him.
Yeah, that neck's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, all pine, you know, it's that old reclaimed pine that we used for the body. And
I think Keith dubbed it the Dirty Snake.
yeah, he played it on American Idol. That was kind of cool.
Cool.
Did he have any information about why it got so trashed, like he left it out in the barn?
He said that he wanted it to look like it was hanging up on the wall in a
Yeah.
bar or in a bar for. Yeah, he tried to describe the whole thing to me, and again, such a sweet guy, man. What a nice guy he is.
Cool.
Now this design on the Tele, I mean, it varies so much from the Teles we see, you know, like the no-caster, broadcaster, but where does this one lie in the history of Telecast?
This precludes them all. This is
okay.
It was a prototype for
Yeah.
the broadcaster or the Telecaster. Yeah.
Did he ever
And
say
these-
where he, sorry.
These were never sold to the public, this one?
We did a run of them.
I mean, back in the Leo days.
No,
The
they-
custom shop did a run of these all out of pine, and I think that was the catalyst for Keith getting his all beat up and dirty.
But then I want to trust Ron.
Did he ever say where he found it? Where he got it?
Yeah.
Well, this is the one I made for him.
He
No,
just
the
did some
original.
research.
You
It's
made it
from
from one that he had, or no?
No.
It was
No,
an
I'm
old
sorry,
Fender
okay.
prototype.
Yeah,
No, he
It
just
was a
described
limited
it.
edition.
He knew about
Yeah.
it, so he.
Yeah, and he
Right.
described what he wanted.
Yeah.
It was a limited edition that we did through the custom shop of an old Fender prototype, and they were really well received. As you can see, they're just so cool and kitschy. And they
Featherweight, you know, is one of those guitars that you just want to play. You know.
Did you actually have one of the old prototypes to fall back on?
Yeah, George
Oh,
Fullerton brought one in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now this is Chris Stein from Blondie. I love the description on this one. That's leather covered.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to do leather work, so when this project came up, West Coast Choppers was the big show, you know, with Jesse James. So I just went on his website, found out who made his seats. This guy named Bill Wall in Malibu. So I contacted him, and sent him an email. Hey, do you want to? No, I'm not interested. He just blew me off immediately. As he was reading Playboy magazine, there was a article about our 54 Strat, and he's like, calls to his guy, hey, I want to get one of these. Do we know anyone at Fender? He's like, yeah, you just told the guy you didn't want to work with him. Oh shit, get him back, So he ended up doing that for me, and the pick guard is actually Manta Ray, which was really cool.
Whoa.
Yeah, Manta Ray's a trip because there's little dots, and they all end in one dot on the back, and they're like a fingerprint, So it was pretty cool. And Chris is real into knives. He's kind of an odd feller, so he had some knives that were Manta Ray covered handles. So he wasn't expecting that. I just threw it in.
Manta Ray and leather. Only the rock stars ask for that.
Yeah, he played the living daylights out of that guitar.
Yeah,
for years.
there's lots of pictures of him playing. So speaking of playing the living daylights out of it, Dennis and I, we both came up in the '80s, and this is John Flansburgh from They Might Be Giants, and this is one of your favorite bands.
Yeah, in 1983, I was like watching one of those video shows on TV, and saw them. I was like, who is that? And I've just been a huge fan. And then I got to build a guitar for him. I built him a left-handed Jazz Master too. But yeah, he plays the living daylights out of that Tele all the time.
Yeah, he plays it a lot. I wanted to include this because just for a guy like Dennis, you do this and you build for all these guys, but to build for like a band that you really love and to have the guy just like still play. I told him, I went to IMDb, and John Flansburgh is like under trademarks. It says the Surf Green Telecaster. So I'm like, that's one of his trademarks,
That's
man.
cool.
Good job.
He thanked me in the liner notes. That's pretty cool to be in the liner notes there. Yeah, what a cool guy.
Now you also worked with Johnny Marr from the Smiths and Modest Mouse, and talk a little bit about this project.
Yeah, if anyone's ever played the Johnny Marr Jag, it's done really well for us. It kind of started here. This was the guitar that got him into the shop. And he's with his pal Billy Duffy from the Cult. They grew up together. Spent the whole day with them. They had me in tears all day long. Very English. But that guitar has evolved quite a bit, but that was kind of the first one. And
now he dubbed that the Jag Master, yeah?
Yeah, because it's a Jazz Master with Jaguar controls, basically. But since then, he's changed out the pickups, and I think he's just playing his tribute model now, but maybe he's playing that still. I don't know.
Yeah, he's modified it over the years.
One of those weird days at work, though, because I was a Smiths fan growing up, which was Johnny Marr played for. And I told him one of the very first songs I ever learned on guitar was Symmetry Gates. And he's like, oh, I played that in open tuning. I'm like, I've always played it regular. He's, well, really show me. So I did it, and then he's showing me. And I was saying, holy shit, I'm getting a guitar lesson from Johnny Marr at work. Yeah.
When you're doing a finesse for a lefty, since you're probably a right-hand player, how do you have somebody else there feel it, fret out? And
we used to have a lefty guy there that would do it for us, but now I've just kind of, I can do the essentials and know if it's playing okay and everything. I've never had one come back. So. I just, literally the day before I got on the plane here, I did a lefty Rosewood. So
we had our last Roadshow, we had a couple of kids there, probably 12 and 13, and kids are in there doing the Hendrix licks and everything, and man, they were not afraid to, they were asking questions the whole time. They plugged in and played, and it was funny because you hear them, and you know, they're learning all the classics, and one of them starts playing Zeppelin, and the other one just joined right in. You know, it's like, okay, we both know this one.
But reality is, you guys are the ones with the money now. You know, kids don't have money. You know, I mean, that's you know, call it what it is.
We all own Harleys.
Yeah.
The last one I wanted to run by was your buddy Colin Hay from Men at Work. He did a Rosewood Tele for him, and Colin's a good guy. He's around touring, and you've built guitars for him. You guys have formed kind of a friendship, yeah?
Just the one, but he was just a really cool, wanted to hang out guy, you know, and a way better guitar player than I thought. You know, I've seen Men at Work through the years, and you know, he's strumming and stuff, but he sat there for like an hour playing that thing, and he was really, really good player. everyone's like, really, you can play? So, nice guy.
So Dennis talks about he brought in an old broadcaster
Yeah,
to show you, right?
he did. He just brought it along. This isn't a fake, man. This was a real broadcaster in that good a condition. Back in the day, you know, they'd put their names on it. So it was Mary, and Mary's daughter, who's an older gal now, sold her mom's guitar to him for, he didn't say how much he paid for it, but I'm sure it was, if I had to guess, 70, 80 grand. Is that what you guys would think for an original broadcaster in that shape? More than that?
More than that, yeah.
It was in ridiculously good shape. The only thing that was weird was the headstock was bent really bad.
What year is it?
It's a 50.
No.
My cohort, Mike, who did the last show with me, he was talking about this too, and he said, boy, when they opened the case, everybody gathered around Dennis's area, and there's like a big crowd there because everyone's like, wow,
Yeah.
it's a real 1950, you know, and they're just such geeks about it.
Yeah, some dirty rock star comes in. We don't. Okay, whatever.
right.
But man, the
The
guitar.
guitar?
King Tut's,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah, so, dude, thanks for sharing those stories with us. That's very cool. So now I want to talk about some cool guitars that Dennis has done. Some have been for customers, some have been for trade shows. If you know what I'm talking about, like the NAMM show or the Tokyo Guitar Show, or you know, sometimes when there's a big guitar show coming up, the guys will just go to the Masterbuilders and go, do something cool. Do
There's
whatever
always
you
a
want.
show somewhere in the world.
Yeah, and they end up doing some really cool stuff, some really out there stuff. So I pulled a couple that I asked Dennis to kind of comment on, and then we'll throw over to his demo, and you'll see some real live soldering and stuff.
And give away a guitar.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with these surf guitars. Now this is. For those of you who don't know Dennis, he loves Hawaii. He goes to Hawaii every year, and he does a lot of these surf guitars, and these are customer orders, and they know Dennis does the surf thing, you know? So how many do you think you've done over the years?
Maybe 25 or so is all. And it was one of my very first NAMM show projects. This guy here. And Frank keeps ordering them from me. So, you know, I got to send a California-based surfboard guitar out here to Chicago. You guys surf the lake, right?
Right.
We snow surf.
Yeah.
When it's not frozen.
So I try to make them all a little bit different, you know. I mean, if there's a lot of these old vintage longboards out there, and I'll kind of pull up some shots and get ideas, but I try to make them all true one-offs, you know. And, I mean, it's a thing.
Cool. You'll also have done some Moto covered guitars. Moto is kind of a nickname. They call it Mother of Toilet Seat.
Yeah.
And this is really what that Moto material is, but it's very cool to see an entire guitar covered in it. And this one here is a recent one that you did. Is this copper or something like that?
That one's just trans orange. I do have a trans copper one coming.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna build it out next week.
Yeah. So is it really difficult? Like how do you kind of get it around the sides? And
It's a pain in the ass, man.
It looks
It
wonderful.
sucks, but it looks great and extraordinarily flammable. Like this thing would go up, this thing would go up like a road flare. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And it won't stop. So don't burn it.
Yeah, right. When you sell it to somebody,
Play it
do
near
you
an open
smoke?
flame.
No. Okay. There you
What is
go.
that? What is
Years
the
ago,
material?
they used to cut up our old bodies, and some of the guys would take them home and use them as firewood. And anything that had the binding on it it was like a fuse, you know.
Let's see. Oh, okay. This is one of my favorites. Every time I do a show with Dennis, I always talk about the Italian olive Stratocaster. And this picture here says it all, really. You know, that's like half a tree there that Dennis is kind of measuring out the spot. And can you talk about you know, a project like this? Where the heck did that wood come from? And,
Well, it's kind of started from inspiration of, you know, being an old furniture maker. You know, guys would do wood turnings and they would leave that big chunk of natural cut in the furniture or whatever. I've always liked that. So I told our guy that does our wood buying, which is, we used to be able to go out and buy our own wood now, but there's these new federal laws I don't know if you're familiar with now that are absolute nightmares for us. So we have a guy that takes care of that for us now. I told him, look, I want a piece with a big chunk of natural cut, and it took like 3 years for him to find me a board finally. And it was from Italy, this big piece of Italian olive. It was, I mean, it was what, 7 feet tall by this wide, and I ended up only getting 2 guitars out of that giant chunk of wood. But and the other one was for Kevin O'Leary, Mr. One. You know, but it was cool. You know, I
You were able to get another natural cut.
yeah, and I let him come in this day, and you know, I gave him the wood and the clear template. And said, "Well, you lay it out where you want it to go," and so that was the personal touch. Again, if any of you want to pay for a plane ticket to come out, you can do the same thing. You know, it's the same treatment.
Well, you know, that's he kind of gets on something interesting, because the custom shop is open. If you guys are ever in Southern California around the Corona area, we have a visitor center over there, and you can go in, you can take a tour of the custom shop. They'll bring you where the Masterbuilders are, and sure enough, Dennis will be right there. And
I'll probably kick you out, but
unless you can go up and wrap. Yeah, it's definitely not a closed off thing. So if you're ever interested, there's information on our website.
How many square foot? Just curious, size building.
it's big. I don't know the
6,000,
square
20,000.
footage, but it's huge.
And the custom shop is a smaller operation inside of a bigger operation.
The custom shop is painfully small.
Okay.
Yeah, like we're constantly rubbing up against each other and stuff.
Masterbuilder section's about the size of the store where you guys.
It's a little bigger, but not much. Yeah, it's pretty small.
All right, so this year at the NAMM show, Dennis did a really cool, interesting build. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, I came across a base 6 neck that I'd been holding on to. The inlays were Mastodon ivory, believe it or not. Apparently there's no issue with Mastodons becoming extinct anymore, so we can use their ivory. So yeah, this is a baritone guitar. I took the bass 6 neck, the long one, and I put baritone strings on it. And man, this is one of my all-time favorite guitars. I wanted to keep this one for myself. It sounded unbelievable.
And this is a good example of how you were saying, you know, some of the vintage style Strats and Tele stuff, they do the initial cut on a CNC, but there's no program for something like this. There's no template.
The body's a ½ inch bigger all the way around, so because I had to make it balance with the neck. So it's huge, you know. It looks like if a little kid was playing a real Tele. And then, you know, I did some borrowing. This is actually a Jaguar control plate upside down, because normally they go the other way, but it just flowed so nicely. And then I came up with a pickguard that I liked, and yeah, it was just one of those things, and didn't get a damn reorder on the thing.
Dennis, is it a vintage pickup?
This one here?
Yeah.
That's a Curtis Novak gold foil. He started, he's doing some really cool stuff. He comes into the shop a lot, but we love him to death. He's doing some great pickup stuff, and he came up with this gold foil. Typically a pickup on a Strat like this one is about 6.5K, maybe 7K output. That's like almost 11. It was really loud.
So this thing is big, and it sounds big
It
too.
sounds huge. It makes everyone fall in love with the guitar all over again.
Cool. This one, it's just, man, this just spoke to me. I rated his Instagram. You know, I saw this thing, and I love the old on-off switches, like you would see maybe on the '80s Jackson or something. You know?
This one was just an order. A guy, what he wanted. He sent me a Photoshop mock-up of what he wanted, and I made it a reality, is what it is. And again, we don't have any templates for where this stuff goes, you know, and all the electronics routing, so, you know, I had to make that by hand. He probably, with export costs and everything, probably paid more than any of us have paid for our house, but whatever, he wanted it and he got it. So
you know, I think this is a great example of that whole, you know, if you can dream it, we can build it type of thing. Because this guy mocked it up on, I don't know, Photoshop or something like that. Sent it to Dennis, had a little chat with him, and man, he made it a reality. That thing is a monster. I love it.
again, it's, you know, it's kind of silly and weird, but it's what he wanted. You know.
Is that a regular thin line body then?
It's a regular thin line body, but there's a lot more going on under, you know, I mean, there's a lot of wiring going on there and there to make it all work. And yeah, I mean, he wanted volume. And then tone and a tone, I think it was tone and no tone, if memory serves. Yeah, it's just weird, you know. Okay.
Speaking of Weird. You've done some alternate designs here. This, well, talk about the double neck first of all. I love this little guy too.
Well, I'd originally done a double neck 8-string mandolin, which we don't make. Again, totally handmade. For the guy in a band called Mo, and I didn't really like his design that much, so I wanted to make another one with the design the way I wanted to do it, so I did, and sold it.
On a double neck guitar, when you're doing it, is weight and balance a factor? Is that
Absolutely.
something that's difficult to get right?
It is. You don't want it to neck dive. You want it to feel pretty nice. Space in between the necks. You know, you want to be able to turn these tuners, but you don't want them too far apart. I've built more double necks than anyone else in the company by far. I got 4 in order right now.
We just talked to the bass player from the Deftones who
Yeah.
asked Dennis to make him a, what was it, a jazz
Bass 6
double
Jaguar
neck.
bass. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one will be interesting.
And double necks, you know, people order a double neck because they want it to do something specific. There's no generic. Just give me a double neck. You know,
Right.
it's like I needed to do that. Well, the first one I ever made was for Davy Johnstone of Elton John, because you know Elton wrote some song that had about 6 seconds of baritone guitar solo, so he orders an $8,000 double neck just so he can play the 8 seconds of
The pinpoint
beauty. Okay,
Business expense.
yeah, whatever.
Okay, this is the last one. I had to throw it in here. I had to throw it in here because I love it so much. But is this probably the craziest thing you've ever done?
Yes.
Talk about this. How does something like this happen?
This was for the Patrick Stump of Fall Out Boy. He, and his words, not mine, he said, "I just want to have the most ridiculous fucking thing I can bring out on stage." And he did. And it was heavy. It weighed a ton, but it's you know, a 5-string bass with the keytar attached to it. So the back of the body, I had to make that attached to it, so the back of the body is kind of shaped like that.
Wow.
Is
And
that wood then? And then you put
It's
keys
wood,
in
yeah.
it? Okay. So
Oh no,
it's a
no,
wood-
this was from Roland. This comes this
tied
way.
that right in.
But I had to make some receivers on the back of this that drop in because he's got to be able to change the batteries on it.
That's
So he had to thumb screw it, and it was ridiculous. Whatever.
Hours and hours of engineering.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, who comes up with all the wiring schematics for these guitars
Me.
that you go? You do?
Yeah.
Wow.
We don't. The thing with Masterbuilt is there's nowhere for us to go. It ends with us. So if you put in an order and Frank or someone here says, well, that's going to be Masterbuilt, and they're going to, well, why? You know, because the team build is like a mini assembly line. Like the person fitting next, that's all they're doing. So if you throw something at them, like I want a strap, but I want the switch relocated over here. Well, that means someone's got to go up and make that pick guard. It's automatically going to go. With Masterbuilt, there's nowhere for us to go. It ends with us. We just have to figure it out. I can't go to my boss and go, I don't know how to wire this. Get out of here, you know? So, yeah, it's all us. We have to figure out how to make all of this stuff. We don't have an engineer that does drawings. It's all us. And, you know, it's nice these days in the digital age, if you order something that's got a different shape, we can email back and forth. I can take a picture and send it to you, and you go, no, take more off of here, or, you know, and we've done that plenty of times. So.
Well, Dennis, guys, give it up for Dennis. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dude, thanks for talking about that stuff. That's awesome.